Sometimes even high-functioning groups get stuck in familiar ways of doing things and find they can't come up with workable solutions to problems or creative alternatives to project development. Making creative thinking and critical thinking techniques regular activities in your group will help encourage group members to view creative and critical thinking as normal and necessary elements of effective groups. Building in creative thinking and critical thinking processes, establishing it as a group norm, should raise your group's chances of coming up with a winning solution when it comes to problem solving and project development. Using some creative thinking techniques can help groups think about familiar issues in different ways. American society is a solution-focused society. We love people who find answers for us, and the quicker the better. This quick fix approach to problem solving can work, but it can often lead to unsatisfied group members and unanticipated long-term consequences. Also, in order to arrive at a shared meaning of the problem and the solution, all misunderstandings, ideas, and concerns should be shared as early as possible. Creative thinking processes can help bring out these concerns. But these creative thinking processes sometimes frustrate group members who are very task-oriented, and I think some of you can relate to what I'm talking about here. It may seem to them that these are exercises and more like games that are a waste of time. It might be necessary to convince some group members of the value of developing a shared meaning of the project and the value of looking at all the possible solutions before getting focused on any one. Sometimes the task-oriented people make a good point. Sometimes it's more efficient and even a good procedure to use some process or solution that has worked in the past. Why reinvent the wheel, right? The key is to recognize when you're dealing with an issue that is routine and can be handled in a routine way, and when you're dealing with a complex issue that needs careful analysis, or an old problem that needs to be looked at in a new way, maybe. This reminds me of a Cincinnati-based nonprofit organization, Starfire Council, that I've been affiliated with for about 10 years. Starfire was set up to address the needs of mentally and physically challenged adults after they've graduated from high school. Between 10 and 20 years ago, some really forward-thinking, really mission-driven administrators at Starfire began questioning the normal processes associated with service organizations such as Starfire, and they became determined to develop innovative processes that would celebrate the lives of challenged adults, not just service them. One by one, through the use of creative thinking processes, they challenged the traditional model. Thinking out of the box became the norm for the administration group at Starfire. One of the first things they challenged was the practice of becoming a client of Starfire. To participate in the activities provided at Starfire, an individual would fill out a registration form, which had to be approved. The person's disabilities had to be verified and documented so that the organization could receive the proper funding for its activities, and to ensure that the facility had the ability to service and care for the individual. The administration challenged these terms and this process. They didn't like the idea that once a person was a client of Starfire, they were now labeled a person with a disability, bringing with them all sorts of limiting stigmas and stereotypes that oftentimes inhibited these clients from achieving their potential or following their dreams or simply having some sort of new experience that could enrich their lives. So they changed their sign-up process. Now, anyone can become a member of Starfire. Anyone who wants to be part of a dynamic organization that values and encourages the talents of all individuals, they can become a part of it. I'm a member of Starfire. At the next board meeting, all the Board of Trustees members became members of Starfire. Volunteers and employees became members of Starfire. People in the community who were associated in any way with Starfire became members. Parents and friends and relatives of people who used the services at Starfire became members. Now, when someone sees that a person is a member of Starfire, they can't make any assumptions about this person. This is just one creative idea that came out of a brainstorming session of the administrative group at Starfire. We're going to look at other ways Starfire challenged traditional thinking and solved problems in future discussions. One of the most common tools used to encourage creative thinking is brainstorming or brainwriting, where people are encouraged to use their intuition, to build on each other's ideas, and to refrain from being critical of any ideas. Here are two videos that show different groups using this technique.
I know we weren't supposed to meet again until next year, but as you know, there have been 2 major accidents recently involving students trying to cross National Avenue, and last month one student was killed. So the administration has asked us to suggest what might make the pedestrian crosswalk a little safer. I know this wasn't on our initial list of priorities, but the administration views this as one of their top student issues. So is it okay with you guys if we brainstorm some of the possibilities?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, let me review the rules for brainstorming. First, everybody should feel free to throw out their ideas, no matter how crazy, and no one is allowed to criticize or evaluate any of the ideas. We'll evaluate them in our next meeting. Second, we need to come up with as many ideas as possible, so quantity is our goal here, okay? So I'll write down the ideas on the chart as you call them out. Okay, I'm ready.
Put in a stoplight to stop the cars.
We could build a tunnel for students to cross the street.
Or an overpass. Or better yet, give the students jetpacks, like the Jetsons.
We could build a wall to prevent crossing other than at the crosswalk.
Put speed bumps on the street to slow the traffic.
Close off the streets and build a pedestrian mall.
Could reduce the speed limits.
Eliminate students.
For the past 3 meetings, we've discussed the pros and cons of remodeling the children's wing. And we've gotten nowhere. We've got to move off of dead center. The parishioners are starting to get impatient.
Felicia's right. If we don't do something soon, we may lose our Sunday school supervisor. Now, the one thing we agree on is the current space isn't working. Am I right?
Right. Some of us want to accept the original plan, which calls for bigger rooms and larger age groupings among the children. The rest of us want narrower age groupings, which call for smaller classrooms, and we can't seem to reach a compromise.
You're right. We've all heard all the arguments, pros and cons, and we still haven't decided to do anything, but to poke holes in each other's plans.
The reason we're stuck is that both arguments make valid points. I think we need to be a little more creative in our approach to this. Are you willing to try an experiment with me?
Sure. Why not?
All right. Let me pass out paper and pencils to everybody. Get ready to do some brainwriting. Right now, we're stuck between large rooms or small rooms in the children's wing. Forget all of that. Close your eyes for a moment and think about our entire facility. I want to lead you through a guided meditation. Imagine that you're an eagle soaring high above the entire space. Picture the entire facility, the children's wing, the sanctuary, the fellowship hall, everything. Imagine that all of the space is made up of children's blocks. We can create the space any way that we want to. Now, everybody get ready to do some private brainwriting. Jot down as many ideas as you can think of to handle the children's needs. Don't worry about whether your idea will work or not. The point of this exercise is to stimulate creative thinking, so don't censure yourself by being critical. When we've finished, we'll put everybody's idea on a chart and see what we've got.
So now let's consider for a moment the difference between creative thinking and critical thinking. Critical thinking typically happens sooner in the problem-solving process, while creative thinking typically happens sooner in the problem-solving process, while critical thinking comes later on. But there are a lot of occasions to use either at all stages of problem-solving or problem development. The key to any of these techniques being successful is that group members have to be open to the techniques and value them. Group members must be willing to respect and value the contributions of each member and be willing to adjust their own thinking in light of the inputs, ideas, and evaluations of others. Critical thinking doesn't mean that group members try to be as critical as possible. Critical thinking means encouraging systematic thinking, using evidence, reasoning, and logic to analyze problems and plan and complete projects. This doesn't mean that emotion doesn't play a part in the critical thinking process. It just means that we have to find a clear path that will deal with any emotions. For instance, let's recall the organization Starfire. If it were possible, we'd all like to provide unlimited funds that could be used to teach, encourage, stimulate, and provide for people with disabilities. The parents of these people would certainly like to see more funding for services that would enhance the lives of their children. This is a highly emotional issue. Those emotions provide the passion needed to make the impossible a reality. These emotions drive parents and administrators to find solutions to problems. Without these emotions, solutions would be kind of meaningless and empty. But those emotions need to be handled. We need to find ways to use those emotions to the best of our ability. We have to make sure that the best interest of the whole group is what we keep in mind. So developing a collectivist culture in the problem-solving group helps with this critical thinking process, and that allows kind of the emotion to still remain a part of what we are doing. Here's an example of an established group whose members feel comfortable enough that they can raise concerns during the critical thinking process about the project that they are working on. And that's a good thing to do in critical thinking, is raise concerns.
I think the drop center, where people give the same amount of hours to the center as they use, sounds like the best alternative.
And it's the least expensive option. All the university has to do is provide a facility. The parents can take care of the scheduling, the childcare, and the organizing.
You're right. It's the easiest solution. It requires the least amount of commitment from the university. I can't imagine why they won't like it.
Yeah.
Look, guys, I know it seems like the simplest and the cheapest solution, but let's just think it through for a minute. You know, what if one parent has to go to class and the next parent hasn't shown up yet? Or what if some of the parents abuse the system? And who's responsible for cleanup? And who keeps all the records? Before we jump on the bandwagon, I just think we need to make a list of issues like this that we'll have to address.
You're right. And those are issues I've thought about as well. Maybe we did get a little carried away. The administration is bound to ask all sorts of questions. We need to be able to anticipate any potential problems.
Yeah, I agree.
Good idea.
Quality circles are another technique that was first mentioned in Chapter 1 that's designed to promote critical thinking. Some of you probably participated in these types of groups at your places of employment. The idea here is for the group members to come up with the best solution to a problem that the people in the quality circle are directly impacted by. Group members are usually especially motivated to find the best solution because typically there's a monetary compensation for the group members that's based on how successful the project is. Here's an example of a quality circle group.
All right, at our last quality circle meeting, we identified a half dozen areas in which the hotel is wasting money and materials. Now, the item that's costing us the most is the complimentary fruit baskets that we provide for the corporate guests. These baskets, they're placed in the rooms and they're just not being used. Last year alone, this cost us over $4,000.
Wow, that would almost pay for our part-time reservations clerk during our high season.
Exactly. So the first thing we need to do today is to figure out why the baskets aren't being used. Then we need to decide what we can do to cut this waste. Lori.
Well, a high percentage of our corporate guests turn out to be no-shows. We put the fruit baskets in the room in advance, and they just sit there and spoil because housekeeping doesn't get to them until it's too late.
Yeah, well, another problem is that we have 2 corporate floors for our corporate guests. Well, a lot of the times they're placed in rooms that aren't corporate rooms, so they end up in a room without a fruit basket.
And even when a guest sees the basket, most assume they'll be charged for it, so it sits untouched.
Okay, so let me sum up here. First, because we automatically place the fruit baskets in the rooms, a lot of them spoil because the guest is a no-show. Secondly, a lot of our corporate guests are simply placed in non-corporate rooms where there is no fruit basket.
Okay.
And finally, when they are placed in a room with a fruit basket, they assume they're going to be charged for it, so they won't touch it. Is that it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is costing us $4,000 a year. What can we do to change that?
Honestly, I think that the corporate floors are more trouble than they're worth. They're never full, so the corporate rooms aren't serving their purpose.
Why don't we make a special delivery of the baskets only when a corporate guest checks in? That way, we don't send the baskets to unused rooms, and the guests will enjoy personal service.
Yeah.
Another thing we could do is we could add a complimentary tag onto the fruit basket. That way the guests will know they won't be charged.
Right.
These are all really good ideas that deserve to be tried. So let's implement them for a 6-month trial period, and I'll see that each one of you receives a bonus from any money we save during that time.
Great.
Okay.
Fantastic.
We'll discuss leadership more in a later chapter, but you can see from these examples that having a leader who can foster and encourage creative thinking and critical thinking is an important part of the group engaging in these activities. The director of Starfire, Tim, is one of those leaders who encourages these activities at every opportunity, mostly by example, as he regularly suggests impossible ideas and then proceeds to critique them until they become workable, innovative solutions and projects. After all, impossible things are happening every day, right?